From the moment I stepped into Magnetodyne's sleek halls, I felt the curious glances and heard the whispered comments trailing behind me. Starting a new job was never easy, especially when seasoned employees eyed newcomers with a mix of interest and skepticism. I had left behind a broken trust, searching for a fresh start and a place where I could rebuild a sense of normalcy. Joining Magnetodyne was daunting. The busy conversations, constant keyboard clatter, and confident strides of experienced staff were both inspiring and overwhelming. I wanted to fit in, to find a place that didn't remind me of my past. But forming genuine connections in a competitive work environment was its own challenge. When I pushed open the tavern door, the noise was as loud as a stadium cheer. I bet I know what game they're glued to, I thought, a bit sarcastically. The noise dipped as I stepped inside, but I ignored the looks and scanned the room until I saw Marge waving from her table. As I walked over, the volume resumed. Marge stood up as I approached. Unsure of what to do, I offered a handshake, but she pulled me into a warm hug. That gesture meant more than she knew. Most of the executive secretaries had been indifferent toward me. As the president's secretary, Marge was respected, so her inviting me out was significant. "I'm glad you came, Jessica," Marge said as we sat down. "I wanted to get to know you better." "Thanks for inviting me, Marge," I replied. "My friends call me Jess." A cheerful waitress appeared to take our orders. Marge ordered a beer and I asked for a wine spritzer. She raised her eyebrows slightly but didn't comment. "I really appreciate this, Marge," I said sincerely. "It's been hard settling in at Magnetodyne, so it means a lot that you reached out. Some of the other women haven't been very welcoming." Marge patted my hand. "It's not that they dislike you, Jess. You're new. And Mary, the woman you replaced, was with us for years." "That makes sense," I nodded. "And," Marge added, "your appearance might be a factor. Some of the women feel a bit intimidated because you're so "Please don't say that, Marge," I interrupted. She raised her brows again as I quickly explained. "I'm not trying to be modest, but I'm not beautiful enough to be a model." She gave me a doubtful look. "I'm not so sure. Most of us would love to look like you, and that brings a bit of envy. They wouldn't envy me if they knew how it's affected my life. Beauty can be more of a curse than an advantage," I said. Marge looked skeptical. "We spend so much on clothes, hair, and makeup to look the way you do naturally. We're the ones cursed." I shook my head. "You might think that, but you'd be wrong." I avoid making eye contact with men because they often take it as an invitation. "Is that so bad?" Marge asked with a smile. "Yes," I said firmly. "It happens so often and most of them are creepy or annoying." "Oh, come on," Marge laughed. "There must be nice guys too." "You'd be surprised," I said. "The nice ones think I'm out of their league, so it's mostly the pushy ones who approach me." "I can't believe you don't get attention from decent men." "What about them? In my experience, they're often worse. They think they're doing you a favor by being seen with you and will ditch you the moment someone else catches their eye." The waitress returned with another wine spritzer. "I didn't order that," I said, confused. "I know," she replied. "That guy over there sent it," gesturing behind me. I turned against my better judgment and saw a heavy-set man approaching. He pulled a chair from a nearby table and sat without waiting for an invitation. "Hey, I'm Al. You looked like you could use some company," he said. "I'm sorry, Al," I said politely. "I'm already with my friend and we're just catching up." He didn't glance at Marge. "That sounds boring. Let's have some drinks and find somewhere more exciting." "No," I said firmly. "I'm not interested." "Come on, sweetheart," he said, gripping my hand with his sweaty one. "You'd have more fun with me than her." I shot Marge an "I told you so" glance before turning back to him. "When did you move to this country?" I asked, feigning boredom. He blinked. "What? I was born here? And yet you never learned what no means," I said, pretending to be amazed. Marge burst out laughing as his face turned crimson. He stood so fast, his chair tipped over. Muttering something under his breath, he left. I turned to Marge. "See what I mean?" "Wow, that was intense," she said, still chuckling. "And that's without me encouraging it," I added. "Imagine if I gave any positive signs. I even have to pick my clothes carefully to avoid too much attention." Marge started to speak, but I continued. "And another thing. I noticed your reaction when I ordered the wine spritzer. I can't afford to relax too much in social settings. I'm always on guard." Marge's eyes widened suddenly as she asked if it happened at work too. I responded with a dry smile, confirming that it did. And quite often. She worriedly inquired if Tom Moffat was involved. I reassured her that he was wonderful and treated me like a granddaughter. Looking relieved for a moment, Marge then narrowed her eyes and questioned me about Mr. Silverbeard, Scott Benson, the sales director, known for his prematurely gray beard and reputation as a ladies' man. I laughed and admitted that he had hit on me on my first day. When she smirked and prompted for more, I added that he continued to do so almost daily, which made her laugh. She then asked about Peter Hamill, the marketing director who worked closely with Mr. Moffat. I told her that while he hadn't directly approached me, he did look at me when he thought I wasn't aware. Marge acknowledged that and noted he was married before asking if there were any others. I nodded and said that nearly everyone except my boss had shown interest. Marge chuckled and asked if there was anyone special in my life at the moment. I told her I was out of the dating game. She expressed surprise and inquired if there had ever been someone serious. Feeling the tension in my clenched fists, I admitted that there had been, but it was a painful story, better left for another time. Marge nodded, understanding, and we switched to lighter topics. By the time we left, I felt like I'd made a friend, which was rare for me. Driving home, I was grateful Marge hadn't asked about the women at work. A few had approached me too. Men were difficult, but at least they were predictable. Women could be worse. Friendly to your face, but full of jealousy behind your back. The following week, I was working on some correspondence when Peter Hamill came by. He waited until I paused typing and asked, "Can I ask a favor?" On guard, I wondered if this was when he'd make his move, but he surprised me. "Do you know Karen, Scott's secretary?" he asked. "I've met her, but not well," I said. She was young, pretty, and seemed smart enough. Scott's upset with her over a late report, and I'm afraid he'll let her go. I wasn't shocked. Scott's department had high turnover, due to his impossible standards and public criticism. Senior management seemed to ignore it, probably because of his impressive sales figures. Peter expressed hope that I could help Karen keep her job. A thought crossed my mind, and I asked if he was romantically involved with her. He looked shocked and denied it, reminding me both were married. I questioned why he would care about Scott's secretary if not for an affair. He explained, looking cautious, that he felt responsible for her since he had hired her. He clarified that he had recommended her for the promotion to Scott's secretary, believing in her potential, but underestimated Scott's harshness. He felt guilty for putting her in that difficult position and wanted to help. I watched him closely for any hidden motives, but saw none. I asked what he wanted me to do. Peter suggested giving Karen some of my work, while Scott was away and writing a positive memo about her to Mr. Moffat, which could protect her from being fired for incompetence. Knowing Scott's need to impress his superiors, I thought the plan might work. Still cautious, I told Peter to have Karen meet me for lunch so I could decide for myself. Peter agreed and left, returning shortly to tell me Karen was on board. We met for lunch, and after a brief interruption from the overly chatty waiter, I got to the point. I asked if she and Peter were involved or if he had made advances. She was genuinely surprised and denied both, insisting she was happily married and that Peter knew her husband. Her response felt sincere. I told Karen I still didn't understand why Peter was helping, but she suggested that he was just a kind person. She seemed sincere, so I decided to help her and outline the plan, which she appreciated. A week later, I noticed Peter near my desk. He thanked me for helping Karen, mentioning he saw my memo on Scott's desk. I replied that I was happy to help and that Karen had potential. Feeling guilty for doubting him earlier, I told him I was impressed by his effort. He blushed, modestly saying it was no more than anyone else would do. As he was leaving, Peter invited me to join him for lunch. Normally, I would have declined, but he seemed genuinely kind, so I accepted. Over lunch, I discovered more about him, including his devotion to his wife, Callie, an accomplished interior designer. He proudly showed me photos of her and her work, which was impressive and had even been used by some company executives. Before Peter could continue, a team member interrupted, needing his decision on expo collateral. Another soon joined with a work question, and before long, a team meeting formed at our table. Peter shot me an apologetic look, but I gestured for him to continue. I watched him work, noticing how he listened, asked questions, and guided his team without intimidating them. They respected him without fear, which was rare to see. As I left, I thought, it's refreshing to see someone in charge who isn't a jerk. Later that afternoon, Marge invited me to the tavern again. I was glad for the second invitation and accepted. After our drinks arrived, she leaned forward and asked if anything was going on between Peter and me. I assured her it was purely professional, explaining we went to the cafeteria after discussing work, which let me get to know him better. Marge raised an eyebrow and asked what I'd learned. I told her Peter seemed genuinely nice and respected as a leader. Seeing she wanted more, I added that he was devoted to his wife. Marge tilted her head, questioning if that was all. I sighed and firmly reminded her that I wasn't interested in male companionship and would never break up a marriage. Her expression softened, and she said, "Someone hurt you, didn't they? Want to talk about it?" I was ready to brush it off, but suddenly I found myself sharing the painful story. I explained that I met my husband during my senior year of college, and we married after graduation. At first, life was great. He loved showing me off, and although I felt uneasy, his excitement made it worth it. He soon encouraged me to wear more revealing clothes, and I agreed to please him. Our relationship started well, and our intimacy was fulfilling for me, though not for him. A couple of years in, he suggested role-playing. It hurt at first, but I eventually played along, imagining actors like Brad Pitt. Marge joked, "Good choice," before quieting down. But that wasn't enough. He pushed me to think about past boyfriends and other men we knew, which made me uncomfortable, but I went along. Then he wanted me to flirt with strangers at bars. After admitting some were attractive, he became more excited, and for a while, our relationship thrived on it. But when he suggested I date someone else for real, I was stunned. I told him he was the only man I wanted, and that I truly meant forsaking all others. He stopped for a while, but soon started again with comments and questions, until he finally said that, to prove my love, I should sleep with another man. Marge, puzzled, asked why he'd do that. Was he looking for an excuse to see other women? I told Marge that I'd wondered the same thing, but my ex had insisted he wasn't interested in anyone else. He claimed he just wanted to watch me with other men and kept saying it would make me happy. I told him the only thing that would make me happy was for him to drop the idea. But he didn't, did he? Marge asked. I confirmed that he hadn't. One Friday I came home to see an unfamiliar car in front of our house. Inside, my husband was speaking with two large men. He introduced them and then shocked me, saying they were there to spend the night with me for his thrill. Tears welled up as I shared how betrayed I felt. My husband, the man I trusted most, was treating me like an object for his own satisfaction, just like so many others had. It was the ultimate betrayal. I made an excuse, left the house, drove to my parents' place, and never went back. After my divorce, I moved away to start fresh, which is how I ended up here. Marge squeezed my hand and expressed her sympathy. I continued, explaining that as he was telling me his plan, I noticed video equipment around the room. He intended to film everything, and I could have ended up online if I hadn't left. Marge's face turned pale. "That's unbelievable," she said. I couldn't stop crying. The worst part was wondering what I did wrong or how I could have saved my marriage. I felt like a failure. Marge reassured me that it wasn't my fault and that there was nothing I could have done to change it. I sighed, admitting that despite her words, I still felt that way. I explained that this experience was why I had no interest in dating. As I wiped my face, I noticed a man approaching our table with 2 drinks. Seeing my tears, he turned around and walked back to the bar. Marge noticed and laughed, saying it looked like I had found a way to keep unwanted attention at bay. I managed a small smile. When we left the tavern, Marge walked with me to my car, giving me a supportive hug and telling me things would get better. I hoped she was right. The following weeks were hectic as Expo approached. It was an important event for Magnetodyne, crucial for launching new components and securing major orders. Success would set the tone for the year. Failure could be costly. Adding to the chaos was a rumor that Mr. Moffat was retiring. I doubted it since he hadn't indicated anything to me. The second part of the rumor was that either Peter or Scott would be chosen as his replacement, dividing the office into pro-Scott, pro-Peter, and anti-Scott groups. Tensions were high, made worse by tight deadlines. Amid this, Mr. Moffat asked me to deliver comments on pricing information to Scott. I discovered Scott was working from home and suggested I bring the materials there. Although I was wary about going to his house, I agreed since it was urgent. Scott lived in an upscale neighborhood, fitting for an executive. I parked, walked up to the porch, and rang the doorbell. But no one answered. I was surprised and tried to look through the windows to see if anyone was home. I checked around the side of the house, but still didn't see anyone. Just as I pulled out my phone to call him, I thought I heard voices from the back. I hesitated, but then started walking toward the back of the house. The voices came from the screened-in porch at the back. As I got closer, I slowed down, sensing something strange. Peeking around the corner, I quickly drew back in embarrassment. The sounds I heard were Scott with a woman. I froze, uncertain about what to do. I was there to deliver materials for Scott, but couldn't announce myself. As I hesitated, I heard the woman, and to my shame, curiosity took over. It had been so long since I'd been intimate, and this unexpected scene captured my attention. It was clear the woman was enjoying herself. I saw her lying on a lounge chair, Scott beside her. His hands moved over her body, making her arch with pleasure. My breath quickened, and I felt a warmth rush through me. Without realizing it, I lifted my phone and began recording the scene. Scott then climbed onto the chair, and the woman eagerly positioned herself to join him. Even from where I stood, it was clear she needed no assistance. The breeze carried the scent of their encounter, making the moment even more surreal. They moved together, lost in each other, and she leaned down to kiss him deeply. I felt a pang of envy. Why couldn't I have someone like that in my life? Scott then shifted positions, taking the lead in a way that showed his confidence and control. She reacted with visible emotion, holding on to him as if seeking closeness. He started speaking, asking if she liked it and comparing himself to her husband. A chill went through me when she answered, confirming his words. Scott boasted about an upcoming promotion, claiming he would treat her husband just as he was treating her. Her moans turned into loud cries, and I worried about being seen by neighbors. So I hurried to the front of the house, left the documents at the door, and rushed to my car. My hands shook as I drove away. What am I going to do? I kept asking myself. Telling Peter would devastate him, but I couldn't keep this to myself. At the office, I struggled to concentrate. The scene replayed in my mind, making me sick. Peter was a good man. Why would she betray him? Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I picked up the phone. Peter, it's Jess. Are you going to be in the office for a bit? He chuckled. Yeah, probably working late till the expo. Can I stop by around 5:30? I asked. Sure, come anytime, he said cheerfully. I winced, knowing that cheer wouldn't last. Walking to Peter's office felt like heading into surgery. You know you have to do it, but every instinct tells you to turn around. Peter greeted me warmly, but his smile faded when he saw my face. What's wrong, Jess? I sank into a chair. I have bad news, Peter. I wish I didn't have to tell you this. It's okay, he said. Just tell me. Avoiding his eyes, I explained. I went to deliver documents to Scott's house today. When no one answered, I walked around and heard noises. I looked at his porch and saw this. I played the video on my phone and handed it to Peter. His initial reaction was a bitter laugh. So that's working from home, he said, not surprised. He tried to return my phone, but I urged him to watch further. As he continued, I saw the moment he realized what was happening. His face fell, showing pain and anger. I felt tears come. It's hard seeing someone's world fall apart. When I reached for the phone, he gripped it tightly. There's more, isn't there? He asked, strained. You don't want to see it, Peter, I said, knowing he wouldn't stop. The video played on, with Peter's wife's voice confirming everything. He went pale. I silently wished I'd never have to see anyone that broken again. When the video ended, Peter slumped in his chair. After a moment, he looked up, eyes hollow. The worst part? It's not just that Callie cheated. It's how she held him, kissed him. It was more than an affair. I couldn't find words to comfort him. All I could say was, I'm so sorry, Peter. Suddenly, something clicked. Peter, Scott wanted me to see this. He asked Mr. Moffat to have me deliver those papers. He wanted me to witness it and tell you. Peter's face hardened. He's always hated me. This is his way of getting back. But why? I asked. You two are rivals. But why go this far? Peter sighed. Before you joined, Scott worked for me. I thought he was smart but reckless. I saved his job once when he lashed out over an audit. I calmed him down and fixed the situation. Later, I recommended him for a promotion. Confused, I asked, he resents you for that? Shouldn't he be grateful? Peter shook his head. In Scott's mind, being indebted to anyone is unacceptable. He never forgave me for it. But why reveal the affair? Isn't he risking trouble? Peter's voice was bitter. The company would consider it a personal matter. Scott wants me to react and sabotage myself, or be so humiliated that my work suffers during a messy divorce. He looked at me, his tone serious. And he chose you as the messenger to get back at you for resisting him. I flushed with embarrassment, then anger. But my main concern was Peter. What will you do now? I asked. He clenched his fists for a moment before relaxing. Right now, I'm just going to focus on preparing for Expo. I can't afford to lose my job, but after that, I'm divorcing Callie and figuring out how to deal with Scott. Peter, I've been betrayed before, so I can understand some of what you're going through. If you need anything, just ask. But please, don't do anything that could hurt you. Thanks, Jess, he said quietly. I appreciate it, and I know how hard it must have been for you to tell me. For now, please, keep this to yourself. I'll bury myself in work. That's the only way I know to handle the pain. He managed a small smile. It also gives me a reason to stay away from Callie. As I turned to leave, I glanced back, feeling my heart break. Seeing a good man's life fall apart was devastating. The days leading up to Expo were tense. Some of it was typical pre-event pressure, but there was added friction between marketing and sales. Rumors spread that Mr. Moffat's retirement was near and that Scott Benson might take over. This fueled tension. Scott's team worked hard to impress him, while Peter's team grew anxious at the thought of Scott leading. I became an unofficial part of Peter's team, offering help when I could. At first, I got a few curious looks at the lunch table. But once Peter welcomed me, the team did too. They didn't hide their frustration. If Scott becomes VP, it'll ruin the company, was a common sentiment. It was unsettling to hear talented employees talk about leaving if Scott got promoted. Meanwhile, their respect for Peter was high. When he wasn't around, they shared stories of how he'd helped solve problems, offering advice that motivated them to improve. It was clear who should be promoted, but I knew executives often prioritized short-term gains over long-term well-being. Peter looked more stressed each day, and I worried he was reaching his limit. The pressure of Expo, his rivalry with Scott, and the situation with Callie were wearing on him. 2 days before Expo, I went to Peter's office. It was late, but I knew he'd still be there. Sure enough, he was with a small group, focused on his computer. Not wanting to interrupt, I paused at the door. He looked exhausted, the lines on his face and dark circles showing more than just fatigue. He spotted me and called, "Hey Jess, come look at this," pointing at the screen. I stepped in and glanced over his shoulder at a feed showing an empty room with curtains. What am I looking at?" I asked. "This is a live feed from our hospitality suite at the MGM Grand in Vegas," Peter said. "Watch this." He switched the view to a large hall and zoomed in on a construction area. "That's our Magnetidine booth for Expo," he explained. I frowned. "Why do you need a live feed from Expo?" Peter gestured to a woman nearby. "Debbie, tell Jess your idea." Debbie started excitedly explaining, "This is great. We can monitor the booth setup live and make any adjustments. It'll also let us see customer reactions in real time, and people at headquarters can finally see how their work impacts the show." Others chimed in with suggestions. Peter turned to me. "We've never tried anything like this before, Jess. We'll test it at Expo, and if it works, use it for future shows." "That's impressive," I said. "Mr. Moffat will be pleased." At the mention of Mr. Moffat, Debbie's face soured. "I hope he's impressed enough to recommend Peter over Scott Benson." She looked embarrassed, realizing I worked for Moffat. "I didn't mean it like that," she added, though it was clear she did. I silently agreed. Her comment sparked reactions from others, and Peter stepped in to calm things down. "We're all tense, but this is out of our hands. Let's focus on what we can control." "But if Scott becomes VP, life here will be miserable," someone said. "Exactly. Why can't they see he'd be a terrible leader?" added another. Peter's eyes lit up. "What if they could see? What if they saw me in action?" "Now that would be perfect, but how?" someone asked. Peter shared his plan, and the room buzzed with excitement and questions. The team's objections eventually turned into a solid plan. Peter raised his hand. "This could get attention from the execs, but could also backfire. If it does, I'll take the blame. We need to make sure no one else's involvement is visible." The group protested, but Peter stood firm. They agreed, albeit reluctantly, knowing they couldn't risk their jobs. I admired Peter's willingness to protect his team at his own risk. When the meeting ended, Peter asked me to stay. He looked serious. "Jess, you'll play a crucial role in this. We can try to hide your part, but it could come out. Are you willing to take that risk?" I thought it over. Working for Scott as VP would be unbearable, and what he'd done to Peter, using me to deliver his message, still stung. Remembering my own experiences with betrayal, I felt even more determined. "I'm in," I said. "Thanks, Jess," he replied, clearly moved. The day before Expo, Peter and his team flew to Vegas for final preparations. Once Expo started, it was a constant stream of demonstrations, customer meetings, and visitors at Magnetodyne's large exhibit. During my breaks, I visited the control room at headquarters to watch the live feed from the Expo floor. I often saw Peter working with the team, while Scott was usually seen socializing with important clients in the hospitality suite. To be fair, Scott looked capable in that role. Peter's plan was set for the last evening of Expo. After most of the major sales activities were done and when Scott's guard might be down, those of us in the know were tense, waiting for the plan to unfold. Everything had been timed precisely, and all we could do was wait. On the last day of Expo, I stayed at my desk until my phone rang, signaling it was time. I grabbed Mr. Moffat's smartphone. He rarely used it and had left it behind. With my text ready, I headed to the control center Peter's team had set up. On the monitor, Scott and his team were celebrating the show's success, drinks in hand. Peter glanced at his watch and gave a subtle nod toward the cameras. Debbie at the control station responded quietly, "Commence stage one." Peter's team members began congratulating Scott's people, spreading the news discreetly. Debbie turned to me and said, "Get ready." I watched as Peter approached Scott, extending his hand. "Well, Scott, looks like you've won." "Congratulations," he said. Scott's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about, Peter?" "I heard Mr. Moffat announced his retirement at the executive committee meeting and that you've been chosen as his successor," Peter replied. Scott looked suspicious until one of his team members confirmed it, clapping him on the back and congratulating him. Debbie zoomed in on Scott's conflicted expression as he processed the news. Then she said to me, "That's your cue." I sent the pre-written text from Moffat's phone. Scott jumped as he read, "Congrats, Scott. I announced my retirement at executive committee today. You will be the new VP. We'll talk tomorrow." Moffat Scott pumped his fist. "Yes, I knew it." He showed Peter the text and shouted, "Read it and weep, Hamill." His team cheered, champagne flowed, and the music changed to celebrate. Peter approached Scott and returned the phone. "Any big plans, Scott, or will you follow Moffat's direction?" Scott sneered. "Things will change. Moffat was useless. I'm cleaning house, starting with marketing. And Peter, start updating your resume." He jabbed Peter's chest for emphasis. For a moment, I thought Peter might react, but he stayed composed and said, "We'll see, Scott, we'll see." The crowd around Scott pulled him away from the confrontation, and we heard him shout, "Come on, everyone, let's party. Drinks are on me." Peter turned to the hidden cameras and said quietly, "We got exactly what we needed. Tell everyone to leave the hospitality suite now. No confrontations." He adjusted the mic and the sound cut out. At the control desk, Debbie gave quick instructions, and Peter's team quietly left the suite. When the last person was out, she turned to me with a triumphant look. "We did it!" When Moffat and the other execs see Scott's outburst, they'll see the real him, and they won't like it. I felt like celebrating. It seemed too perfect. There might be questions about why Scott thought he was promoted, but Mr. Moffat and the others would likely overlook them given Scott's behavior. Not only had Scott insulted Mr. Moffat, but he also attacked the marketing team, which Moffat respected. I felt confident this would be Scott's downfall. I couldn't sleep that night, so I went to work early. Mr. Moffat always held post-show reviews, and I was eager for this one. The executive suite was empty when I arrived, so I went to Peter's area. There, I found Debbie crying at her desk. "Debbie, what happened?" I asked. She looked up, eyes red. "It's gone, all the footage from last night. The server crashed overnight, and we don't have a backup." Peter walked in, overhearing her. He turned pale. "What do we do now?" I asked. He shook his head. "I don't know. This could be bad." To my surprise, Peter comforted Debbie. "It's okay, Deb. It wasn't your fault. You did everything right. Sometimes things go wrong." "I should have backed it up," she sobbed. "No one could have expected the server to crash," he reassured her. He turned to me. "Get to your office and try to stall Mr. Moffat. I'll think of something." I nodded and left, holding back my own tears. We had lost the evidence, and now Peter had to explain his actions. What seemed like a victory had turned into a disaster. At my desk, I composed myself just as Mr. Moffat walked in, clearly furious. "Call Scott Benson's office and get him up here," he ordered. I called and informed Mr. Moffat that Scott hadn't arrived yet. "Tell her I need to see him as soon as he gets in, and get Peter up here too," he said. I called Peter. Mr. Moffat wants you and Scott here ASAP, I said quietly. And he's very angry. Peter sighed. All right, Jess, I'll be right there. When he arrived, he looked defeated, but gave me a weak smile before entering the office. I thought, it's probably my fate too when Mr. Moffat finds out. With the door open, I listened nervously. Mr. Moffat, usually composed, was direct. What can you tell me about the events at the Magnetodyne suite last night? Peter began. After Expo ended, we gathered at the suite to relax. Then, before he could finish, Scott Benson walked in, looking disheveled but smug. He glanced at Peter and then said to Mr. Moffat, Sorry for being late, boss. Last night's celebration got a bit out of hand. Mr. Moffat glared at Scott. What exactly were you celebrating? He demanded. Scott, unfazed, replied, My team was celebrating my promotion to VP after your retirement, as if explaining to a child. What? I never said I was retiring, Mr. Moffat shot back. Yes, you did, Scott insisted, at yesterday's executive committee meeting. I did not, Mr. Moffat said, his tone sharp, and there was no discussion of a successor. Peter exchanged a quick glance with me, clearly uncomfortable with where this was going. Scott pushed on, holding up his phone. I have your text message here, he said confidently. Mr. Moffat looked baffled. I never sent you any text. Yes, you did, Scott said, scrolling through his phone, only to pause and frown. It's gone. Someone erased it. I thought I saw Peter smirk for a moment, but his expression was blank when Scott turned to him. Scott wasn't done. He grabbed Mr. Moffat's phone from the desk. No password? He muttered, checking the text messages, which were empty. Where are your texts? He demanded. I don't send texts, Mr. Moffat said, getting angrier. I make calls. Scott glanced around suspiciously. Someone erased the message announcing my promotion? He looked at Peter, then at me, making me duck out of sight. Young man, Mr. Moffat said sternly, we're here to discuss what happened in the hospitality suite. Care to explain? Scott stammered. It was just a celebration after I was tricked into thinking I'd been promoted. I see, Mr. Moffat said coldly. Ms. Martin, help me set up my computer. I expanded the screen and confirmed it was ready. Check my email for one from Lucas Masterson, Mr. Moffat directed. He turned to Scott and Peter. Does that name mean anything to you? Yes, Scott replied. He's president of Masterson Industries, our biggest client. Good, Mr. Moffat said dryly. Wouldn't you agree we should maintain a professional image with him? Of course, Scott said, puzzled. Mr. Moffat's voice grew colder. Lucas, an old friend, called last night, asking if our expo conduct was typical. When I didn't know, he sent photos. Ms. Martin, show them. I started the slideshow. The first image showed our sales team at the bar. The next showed Scott on stage, bottle in hand, leading a cheer, the company logo in the background. The following images depicted Scott with two young women, all clearly intoxicated, dancing provocatively. The room gasped when the next photo appeared. One woman had lost her clothes, and Scott was touching her as the crowd cheered. Then the final image flashed. Scott using a 3D model of the company logo inappropriately. Turn it off, Mr. Moffat barked. I shut down the screen. Mr. Benson, you disgraced yourself and Magnetodyne Industries, he thundered. Scott, red-faced, protested. This only happened because I was tricked into thinking I was promoted. Thank goodness you weren't promoted, Mr. Moffat shouted before regaining some composure. It doesn't matter why you acted that way. Your behavior was outrageous and unacceptable. Even without our top client witnessing it, you were setting a terrible example for your team. He turned to me abruptly. Ms. Martin, call HR and security. Have them escort Mr. Benson to his office and give him 15 minutes to gather his personal items. Effective immediately, he is terminated for cause. Yes, sir, I said quickly, and made the calls. Behind me, Scott yelled, This is all your fault, Hamill. You set me up. Before he could continue, security arrived and escorted Scott out. As they waited for the elevator, Peter stepped beside Scott. From my spot in the hallway, I heard Peter whisper, You betrayed me, and now it's your turn, Scott growled, but security stepped in between them. The elevator doors opened, and HR joined them as they left. Peter and I were left behind. As I turned to return, Peter said quietly, Come see me when you can. We need to talk. I nodded and returned to Mr. Moffat's office. Anything else you need, Mr. Moffat? I asked. He looked up, visibly exhausted. Yes, 3 things, Ms. Martin. First, I'm sorry for making you see those photos. I managed to stop before the worst, but I hadn't remembered what happened before. I smiled slightly at his consideration. Second, Please call Lucas Masterson so I can apologize and update him on our actions. I started for my desk, but he stopped me. And can you remove those photos from my computer and phone? I don't ever want to see them again. I nodded, taking his phone back to my desk. Before I left, he looked at me shrewdly. I don't know who led Scott to believe he'd been promoted, he said, making my heart pound. But I owe them gratitude for exposing Scott's true colors. I thought I saw a hint of a smile before he returned to his serious demeanor. Now, about that call to Lucas, he said, and I hurried out. By lunchtime, news of Scott's firing spread, and rumors ran wild. I avoided the chatter, not wanting any more suspicion than necessary. I visited Peter's office to share what Mr. Moffat had said, hoping it would reassure him. Although he listened, the weariness on his face persisted. Then, unable to shake my curiosity, I asked, "Peter, who are those women with Scott?" He gave a small smile. "Not sure, but probably free birds," he said. Seeing my confusion, he explained, "People who sneak into trade shows for free food, drinks, and parties. Sometimes more." "You never," I started to ask. "Never," he said firmly. "It's reckless, and I'm a faithful husband." He paused, bitterness crossing his face. My heart ached for him. "When do you plan to confront her?" I asked softly. "Tonight," he said with a sigh. "I have the papers ready, and will give them to Callie when she comes home." "I'm so sorry, Peter," I said. I almost forgot about her with all this Scott chaos. A thought struck me. "Peter, I still have those photos Lucas sent. Would it help to have a copy?" He considered it and nodded. "Yes, please. I want her to see who she chose over me." When I returned with the prints, he was ready to leave. "I need to be there when she arrives," he said, "and I might as well go. I won't be able to focus until this is done." "I understand," I told him. "But if you want to talk afterward, I'm here." "Thanks," he said. "I'd appreciate that. You're really the only one who knows everything." That evening, Marge invited me out for a drink, but I declined. I was drained from the morning's drama and worried about Peter. I couldn't stop thinking about the confrontation he was facing, and I knew I'd be poor company for Marge. For the second night in a row, I couldn't sleep well. I went into the office early, hoping to catch Peter. I was waiting by his office when he arrived, and he thanked me for the coffee I brought him. Seated on the office sofa and chair, I couldn't wait any longer and asked how things went with Callie. "About as you'd expect," he said, and began to tell me everything. I was at the kitchen table when Callie came home. She looked surprised to see me since I usually get home later. She sat across from me and asked what was going on. I handed her an envelope. "What's this?" she asked, and I told her to look. She opened it and started going through the screen captures from the video on Scott's porch. At first, she didn't understand what she was seeing, but when she got to the next picture, she gasped. She flipped through the rest quickly, her face turning red. I couldn't tell if she was more ashamed of what she did or of being caught. "Peter, I know I messed up, but it was just a one-time mistake. You were so busy with work, and it had been so long since we were intimate. When Scott approached me, I couldn't resist." I shook my head. "That's not true, Callie. This wasn't a one-time lapse. It was an ongoing affair." "No, I promise it only happened once." Instead of arguing, I played the video I had copied. Her face changed from discomfort to defensiveness to anger as she watched. When the audio of her laughter about making me a fool played, she shouted, "Turn it off!" I let it go a moment longer, then stopped it. "All right, you know about us. I assume those are divorce papers in the other envelope?" she asked coolly. I pushed the papers toward her, and she quickly scanned them. I thought she'd be shocked, but she was surprisingly calm. "It doesn't matter," she said. "I was going to file for divorce myself once Scott got his promotion. So, you threw our marriage away for the money and status of being with a top executive?" I asked bitterly. "Peter, let's be realistic. You've been working long hours, ignoring me, and getting nowhere," she said, and anger flared in me. "I was working for us, to make a better life." She gave me a patronizing smile. "That's what I thought for a while. But while I was redecorating Scott's house, he told me the truth about your career. You're stuck at Magnetodyne while he's about to move up. From the video, it seemed you were more interested in him than his career," I said coldly. She blushed. "Maybe I prefer both to what you offer," she retorted. I felt worn out. "So, you and Scott plan to marry after our divorce and his promotion?" "Exactly," she said. "What if I told you Scott isn't getting that promotion?" I said. Her eyes narrowed. "I'd say you were lying." What if I told you Scott was fired from Magnetodyne this morning? I added. I saw a flash of fear before she covered it. Impossible. His team's breaking records. They wouldn't fire him. I reached into my jacket and took out another envelope. What's that? She asked. Photos of Scott at the expo in Vegas earlier this week. Mr. Moffat found them quite interesting. I showed her the first photo. She relaxed a bit. No one's going to care about a sales director letting loose after a trade show, she said. She stayed quiet at the second photo, but looked uneasy. When I turned over the next one, she gasped. Who are those women with Scott? She asked, jealousy in her voice. I have no idea, I said. I've never seen them before, but Scott certainly seems to know them well, I add, turning over the next photo. She said nothing, but her expression darkened at the pole dance image. When she saw the photo of Scott acting inappropriately with the company logo, she slammed her fist on the table. The final two photos, showing Scott engaged in various acts with the women, made her break down and cry. How could he betray me like that? She sobbed. How could he embarrass me in front of all those people? The irony of her reaction left me speechless. After a moment, she looked up at me with red, tear-filled eyes. Is it true? She asked. Is what true? I snapped. Scott said you were involved with your boss's secretary. Is that why you started an affair with Scott? I asked in disbelief. I saw her and she's so beautiful. I thought you couldn't resist her. Not everyone has the same morals as you and Scott. For the record, I've always been completely faithful, I said, shaking my head. I can't believe you believed a salesman's lies. She buried her face in her hands, crying harder. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and went out to get dinner. When I returned, I saw that Callie had packed her things and left. I felt so bad listening to him. That must have been awful, Peter, I said when he finished. How are you holding up? Honestly, he said, my emotions are all over the place. I feel bitter about Callie's betrayal, but I'm also sad about the end of my marriage. I'm glad Scott got what he deserved, but I feel exhausted by everything. Mostly, I just feel drained. I know it's hard, Peter, but it will get better, I said, even though the executives tried to keep the details of Scott's firing under wraps. Too many people knew some version of the story, and it became the main topic of office gossip for weeks. Ironically, Scott's former team spread the story the most, perhaps as payback for how he treated them. Peter's team kept their thoughts private, but seemed pleased by the outcome. Unfortunately, details about Scott's involvement in Peter and Callie's divorce also circulated. People didn't directly question Peter, but whispers and side glances were common whenever he left a room. I hated it for him, but there wasn't much I could do. Knowing what I did, I stayed quiet and checked in on Peter regularly, finding reasons to stop by his office or join his team for lunch. Marge would sometimes take me to her favorite bar after work. As the CEO's assistant, she likely knew as much as I did, but she never brought it up. She would ask how Peter was doing, and I kept her informed. Oddly, she also asked how I was holding up, though I was only indirectly involved. I always reassured her that I was fine. About 4 months later, Debbie, who ran the control desk at Expo, called me. She said Peter's team was planning a surprise celebration after work and asked if I'd like to join. When I asked why, she explained that Peter's divorce had just been finalized. I told her I'd be there. The celebration was held in a private room at a bar popular with the marketing team. The room was decorated with banners saying, "Free at last," "Peter is available," and "Look out, ladies." It seemed juvenile and tasteless to me, but everyone else enjoyed it. The noise was loud, fueled by several kegs of beer being quickly emptied. It was nice to see how much Peter's team valued him, but when I saw him, he didn't seem to be enjoying the party as much as everyone else. Someone coaxed him to make a speech, and after resisting, he climbed onto a table. He kept it brief, thanking everyone for the party and acknowledging their hard work at Expo. Then he told them to keep having fun and stepped down. As the party continued, I made my way to him and we sat at an empty table. "Thanks for coming, Jess," he said. "What do you think of the party?" I studied his face and noticed the lines around his eyes were still there. More importantly, "How do you feel about it, Peter?" I asked. The smile he was trying to maintain slipped, revealing how unhappy he really was. I know I should be excited about being single again, but honestly, I just feel down, and I'm not even sure why. I think I know why because it's exactly how I felt after my divorce. My guess is you're feeling low because you're mourning the loss of your marriage. But that doesn't make sense, Jess. I don't want to be with Callie anymore, not after what she did and how she treated me. I could never trust her again, he said intensely. Of course not, I said gently. But what you're grieving is different. You probably always imagined yourself in a committed relationship, maybe starting a family. Callie shattered that vision, so it makes sense you feel down. You've lost the life you thought you'd have." He looked at me thoughtfully and slowly nodded. "There's a lot of truth to that, Jess." He looked at me again. "Thanks for being such a good friend." At that moment, some of his coworkers came over and grabbed his arm. "Enough of this serious talk, Peter. Come on, join us." They pulled him away, but he smiled and waved at me as he left. I slipped out shortly after and headed home. Parties like that aren't my thing, but I felt good knowing I could be there for Peter and found myself smiling on my way home. With his divorce finalized, I kept waiting for Peter to lift out of his depression. In some ways, it was clear he was healing, but it didn't seem to change how he acted around me. He would wave and smile when he saw me, and we still connected easily during conversations. But I kept searching for something more that I never found. A couple of weeks later, Mr. Moffat called me into his office. After asking me to close the door, he gestured for me to sit. "Please keep this confidential, Miss Martin," he said. "Remember the executive committee meeting during Expo? I did tell the committee I was planning to retire, but after the mess with Scott Benson, they asked me to stay and help fix things. Now that everything is back on track, I'm moving forward with my retirement. I'll be announcing it after lunch, but I wanted to give you a heads up." I was stunned by the news, but appreciated his thoughtfulness. "There's something else you should know," he continued. "You'll have a new boss, Peter Hamill. I hope that's good news for you." "Oh, Mr. Moffat, I'm thrilled for Peter, but I'll miss working for you. You've been wonderful." I stood up and hugged him. He smiled and said some kind words before asking me to call Peter to his office. When their meeting ended and Peter came out, I made sure to congratulate him on his well-deserved promotion. "Thanks, Jess," he said warmly. "That means a lot." As he walked away, his warmth lingered with me, but by the afternoon, I felt down again. At the end of the day, Marge came by and asked me to join her at the tavern. "Marge, I have things to do at home," I said, but she wouldn't take no for an answer. Her persistence, which made her so valuable to the CEO, left me with no choice but to agree. At the tavern, she leaned across the table and looked at me intently. "All right, Jess, what's going on?" "I don't know what you mean, Marge," I said defensively. "Nonsense," she said, surprising me with her rare use of strong language. "You've been moping around for weeks like someone with a sick pet, and today you're acting like it died. I'd think you'd be happy about working for Peter. So what's wrong?" I tried to hold back, but something broke inside, and I found myself wiping away tears as I tried to explain. "Peter's promotion is the last straw, Marge. I don't know if I can handle seeing him every day." "I don't get it, Jess. Why not?" I sniffled. "I know his wife's affair and the divorce were hard on him, but I thought once it was over, he might relax around me, maybe want to go out. But he still treats me like just a friend, part of the team. It's tearing me up." Marge's expression softened. "You really care about him, don't you? You always have." "No," I objected. "I didn't have feelings for him while he was married. I admired him and liked working with him, but it was purely professional. I would never let myself get interested in a married man." "For someone who wasn't interested like that, you sure spent a lot of time with him," Marge said dryly. "I had to," I replied. "He was an important part of Mr. Moffat's team." "Uh-huh, sure," Marge said with a hint of sarcasm. "But after you saw his wife with Scott, your perspective started to change." "How did you know that?" I gasped. Marge just smiled knowingly. Then her expression turned serious. "So you thought you had a connection with Peter and hoped it would turn into something special, right?" "I guess so," I admitted softly. She looked at me for a moment, then said, "You know, you really are being clueless." "Now, wait a minute, Marge," I said, annoyed. "You might be my friend, but you can't talk to me like that." She crossed her arms and leaned forward. "I meant what I said. You're acting clueless." "Now listen to me. Half the people at Magnetodyne know you have a big crush on Peter Hamill. But what have you done to show him that?" "I've done plenty," I said defensively. "I visit him whenever I can. I make it a point to sit with his team at lunch in the cafeteria. "Isn't that what you did when he was still married?" Marge interrupted. "Well, yes," I admitted. "But not as often," I added weakly. "So how would he know your feelings have changed if your behavior hasn't?" she asked. Before I could answer, she pressed on. "Have you ever even touched him?" "No," I said, surprised. "I would never do that." "I mean, touched his arm or hand, something to create a connection." "I'm sure I have," I said, stalling, but I couldn't remember a specific instance. "You're afraid to touch men because you think they'll misinterpret it, aren't you?" "Maybe a little," I admitted. She continued looking at me. Then she said, "You know what your problem is, Jess? You're too beautiful. I opened my mouth to speak, but Marge cut me off. Your whole life, you've relied on your looks. You never had to worry about finding men. They were always coming to you. I bet your first husband approached you, not the other way around. I looked down at the table. Well, maybe. He did come up to me at a college party. Exactly. You're used to being passive, waiting for the guy to make the first move. If he doesn't, you dismiss him and wait for the next one. And that's not all. You use your beauty as a shield to keep men at a distance, even those you might actually be interested in. And you do that not out of arrogance or ego, but because you're scared. You're afraid to take a risk and open yourself up, worried that you might make a bad choice. So you hide behind your looks, hoping that Mr. Right will find a way to break through those defenses. I was speechless, but Marge continued. I'd bet that the reason you're so afraid is because the one man you chose, the one you believed was Mr. Right, ended up being your biggest mistake. Since then, you've been too scared to take a risk again. So even though part of you wants to build something with Peter, another part tells you to step back and wait. You just linger and hope he'll break through and chase you. I couldn't meet her eyes. She came over, hugged me, and kissed my cheek. Think about what I said, Jess. See if there's any truth to it. Then she left. That night, I lay in bed, tossing and turning, replaying Marge's words. Some of what she said stung, and not all of it was accurate. But I had to admit she'd been right about many things. By early morning, I made a decision. Even then, I barely slept. When I got to work, I made a phone call and moved ahead with my plan. I wasn't sure it was the right move, but at least I wasn't being passive. Shortly after I returned to my desk, Peter came to meet with Mr. Moffat again. They spent a long time reviewing marketing plans, but eventually the meeting ended. As Peter passed my desk, he said, I'm looking forward to working more closely with you, Jess. I took a deep breath and stood up. Peter, I met with HR this morning and arranged for a transfer. In 2 weeks, I'll be starting in a new department. He stepped back as if I'd slapped him. But why, Jess? Did I do something to upset you? Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Mr. Moffat standing in his doorway looking concerned. I kept my focus on Peter. No, Peter, it's not you. It's me. Over the past few months, I've developed strong feelings for you. But company policy prohibits relationships between employees and their supervisors. And since I want to pursue those feelings, I can't work under you. Over Peter's shoulder, I saw Marge peeking around the corner. I kept my eyes on him, holding my breath as I waited for his reaction. He looked at me in shock. But you never said or did anything, he said. I glanced at Marge. I know, I said. But I'm saying it now. Peter stayed silent, and time felt like it had slowed. Then, with my heart pounding, he stepped forward and took my shoulders in his hands. Given the circumstances, I think we can skip the customary 2 weeks' notice, he said, and kissed me with such intensity and promise that I barely heard the applause coming from Marge and Mr. Moffat. Before anything else, I was a man focused on work. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew each other and followed a simple path. School, a brief stint in college, and then work. My job wasn't glamorous, but I liked the responsibility. I worked hard, saved money, and lived a quiet life. Relationships and love weren't priorities for me. I figured it would happen eventually. Then I met Laura. She was unlike anyone I'd known, with a determination that went beyond daily life. We met through work, and casual lunches soon became more serious. Laura was ambitious, and that ambition drew me in, though I didn't realize how all-consuming it would be. I was born Leslie, a name I never felt connected to, so at 18, I legally changed it to Jacob Wagner. For 7 years, I had lived as Jacob, growing comfortable in my new identity. Life shifted when I met Laura Elizabeth Keyes during a work training session. She had an almost royal presence, and I was immediately captivated when she introduced herself. Other guys were drawn to her too, but I was the boldest, asking her out first. She politely declined, as she did with everyone else, but it only made me more determined. On the last day of training, she gave us her business card, saying we could reach out with any questions. I waited until Monday to call her, leaving a message. What problem do I need to come up with to get you to go on a date with me? She called back the next day, and after some playful banter, we arranged to meet in the evening instead of lunch. That's how it all began. We had dinner together every night for the rest of the week and continued this routine for 5 more weeks. We never had lunch because she trained daily from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. She was either running, swimming, or cycling, preparing for the Ironman competition. The Ironman involved a 2.4-mile swim, a 112-mile bike ride, and a full marathon of 26.2 miles, all completed within 17 hours. Laura was vegan, so our meals were mostly quinoa, kale, tofu, and other plant-based foods. It took me a while to adjust to her diet. We first made love at her house, which was more of a gym than a home, with rubber balls and weight benches as seating. Her bed was hard, but our physical connection was incredible, and it only got better over time. We had closeness whenever we could. 14 months after we met, we got married. She stopped training during our honeymoon, but resumed immediately after. One evening, she mentioned wanting to compete in the Ironman in Wisconsin, her first at that level, and said she'd need to train even harder. I couldn't imagine her training more than she already was, but she was confident. I was hesitant, as her training was already intense, and preparing for an Ironman would double the time. Soon, our expenses started increasing. About 4 months into her intensified training, she said she needed a coach. Her gym had a trainer with Ironman experience, but he was expensive. The first thing he did was convince her to quit her job and focus on training full-time, which she did without consulting me. Losing her income strained our budget. She had a good bike, but her coach insisted on more, one for competition, one for training, and even a spare. She ended up with 4 bikes costing as much as my truck. Time passed, and I decided it was time to meet Laura's trainer. I went to the gym, knowing his name was Jason Hendricks since I'd been writing him checks every week. I saw him standing over Laura as she lifted weights. After watching them for a bit, they moved on to another exercise involving pulling weighted ropes from the wall. Laura had her back to the wall, holding the ropes, and Hendricks stood very close, facing her. I watched as he ran his hands along her arms, then cupped her chest while talking to her. "Why are you touching my wife's bosom?" I asked, startling them both. "Jacob, what are you doing here?" Laura asked. "I thought it was time to meet Mr. Hendricks," I replied. He offered a handshake, but I ignored it. "You have no right to touch her like that," I said. "I can't train her properly without it," he responded. "You need to touch her bosom to train her? What kind of training is this?" "It's part of my method." "Then we'll find someone else. You're fired," I said. "Laura, I'll see you at home." I walked out, and she followed me shortly after, furious. "You can't fire him for doing his job," she argued. "He was playing with your bosom, and you let him. He was assessing my muscle mass." "That's ridiculous," I said, laughing. "He was just playing with your bosom, and you stood there smiling." "He's not fired. I need him," she insisted. "Then you can keep him, but I won't pay for it or any of your training." She glared at me. "I'll get a job, but he stays." I paused before asking, "How important is he to you?" "Very important," she answered. "And me? Where do I rank on your list of priorities?" She didn't answer directly, but her silence and defiant stance were enough. I realized where I stood. I sat for several minutes confused. It was clear she had made her choice, which made mine easier. I went to my computer and started researching how to handle family issues. I decided to act before she did. I wasn't going to let that guy get another cent of my money. If she wanted to pay him, she could do it with her own funds. Before we got married, I had a fifth-wheel trailer I used during college summers. Laura and I had taken it to the mountains for her training, as she preferred biking and running on slopes. I went upstairs and she was in the bathroom talking to someone. I only caught, "See you tomorrow." I gathered some clothes and moved them to the trailer. On my second trip, I heard the bathtub running, knowing she'd be there for at least an hour. After several trips, I packed my computer and other personal items and spent the night in the office parking lot. The next day, I told my boss about the situation. When he asked my plans, I admitted I didn't have any yet. That evening, I returned home to pick up more things. Laura was eating a kale salad. As I gathered files in our office, she asked, "Where did you go last night?" "I stayed at the plant," I said. "Did you bring Hendricks over to evaluate you again?" "No, it wasn't necessary," she replied. "Would it have been true?" I asked. "No." After a pause, she asked, "What are you doing?" "I'm leaving," I said. "Why?" "Because you made it clear yesterday that he's more important than me. I need him to do well in Wisconsin. No other coach can help me like he does. I saw how well you two work. He touches you, and you smile." "He didn't fondle me." I shook my head. "We were a good team once. We could be again. Just give me a chance." "Will you give him up as a coach?" She shook her head. "Then I'm leaving." I packed my things and headed to the door. "When will you be back? That's up to you. Tell me he's done, and I'll stay. If not, I'm leaving for good." Without hesitation, she said, "He's staying." One of us was being selfish, or maybe both. I wanted a wife. She wanted to compete. It took me 3 trips to load the rest of my things into my truck, and she watched each time. On my last trip, she asked, "Where are you going?" "I don't know." "When will you be back?" "We've already discussed this. I'm not coming back." "Jacob, you can't do this just because of my coach. And you can't choose a coach over me." but it seems like you are. I took half of our money, canceled her credit cards, and turned off her phone. I reminded her that bills were due and advised her to get a job soon or face financial trouble. I grabbed her competition and spare bikes from the garage, threw them into my truck, and she ran up, protesting. "You can't take them. I paid for them," I replied and drove off. She didn't seem to care I was leaving, but losing the bikes upset her. The next morning, I drove by the gym and saw her crying while Hendrix held her hands. I didn't know if it was because our marriage was over or because I took her bikes. I took the next day off to find a place for my trailer and got settled. Later, I told my parents everything. My mom asked if I was okay, and my dad asked if I needed money. I said yes to the first and no to the second. Laura and I didn't speak for 2 weeks until she called. She left a message, so I called back. "Where do we go from here?" she asked. "Are you still training with Hendrix?" "Yes, I need him." "Then we're getting a divorce." "You can't be serious." "Have you slept with him?" "How could you ask that?" "Simple question. Have you?" She hung up. The next day, my boss offered me a position in Leadville, Colorado, and I left for Colorado the following day. 2 months passed and fall arrived in Colorado with winter approaching. A small trailer wasn't ideal for winter, so I rented an apartment and bought cheap secondhand furniture. After living in a trailer, the extra space felt odd. My family invited me home for Thanksgiving, and I agreed. By then, I had returned to my regular diet. No more quinoa, kale, or tofu. Thanksgiving with my family was enjoyable, and no one missed Laura. The day after, I headed back to Leadville. While filling up my truck, I ran into an old friend, Zeke. We caught up, and he told me he had seen Laura with a muscular guy, likely Hendrix. Over coffee, Zeke mentioned seeing them holding hands and kissing in public. While we talked, Zeke's brother called. During the call, Zeke learned that Laura and Hendrix were staying at the EMS motel. He suggested we check it out before I left town. We drove to the motel, and I parked in a distant corner. Zeke's brother, who worked there, assured us there were no working cameras, so we didn't need to worry about being seen. He also mentioned that Laura and Hendrix had been staying there because Hendrix was married and couldn't take her to his house. They usually stayed once a week, and since his wife was away for Thanksgiving, they had been there for 2 days. Zeke asked his brother for the key to their room, assuring him we'd return it quickly. M handed over the key without hesitation. The motel still used regular keys instead of electronic ones. Zeke and I went to their room, and it was clear someone had recently had closeness there. "Okay, Jacob, it's up to you now. I'll take pictures from outside, and you take them inside," Zeke said. "Are you sure M won't get in trouble?" I asked. "He owns the place. He's fine. Just do your part, and I'll do mine." The room was on the second floor, overlooking a construction site. The balcony door was broken and couldn't lock. I went downstairs to ask M for a ladder, and he directed me to a shed. I grabbed a ladder, tested it, and then returned to my truck to wait. About half an hour later, Zeke called to say they were back. It was already dark, and I watched for the room's light to come on. When they didn't bother closing the curtains, I quietly walked up the stairs and started taking photos as they undressed after the gym. When they looked toward the balcony, I ducked out of sight. Laura never had closeness without a shower, so they headed to the bathroom. With the door open but the shower built into the wall, they couldn't see what was happening outside. I got to work, packing all their clothes into 2 travel suitcases. I grabbed everything hanging on the clothes rack by the bathroom, tossing it all over the balcony. I checked the bathroom for any forgotten items, even crawling in to take all the towels, washcloths, and the bath mat. I could hear them talking in the shower, but couldn't make out the words. I knew they couldn't see me because of the shower curtain. I threw everything, including the bed linens, off the balcony and went downstairs to load it all into my truck. The people in the room below watched me, but when I put my finger to my lips and mimed locking my mouth, they nodded in agreement, signaling they'd keep quiet. They were likely cheating too, so they had no reason to say anything. I met Zeke and M at the front desk, giving M the bed linens. The brothers laughed as M started printing photos Zeke had taken. Time was short, even if Laura and Hendrix took a quick shower. M had just begun printing my photos when the front desk phone rang. He winked at us when he saw the caller ID. "Reception desk," M answered. After a pause, he said, "Are you saying the ladder is still there? I'll send extra towels and bedding, but I can't help with your clothes. I'll call the police." Pause. "No police? Okay, but all I can offer is towels." Pause. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." He hung up, and we burst into laughter. I asked if I could deliver the towels myself, which made them laugh even harder. M handed me a fresh pack of towels and sheets. I went upstairs, knocked on their door, and called, "Room service." Hendrix cracked the door open. "I'll take them," he said, but I pushed past him. Laura stood there, dripping wet and trying to cover herself. They didn't recognize me until I tossed the towels to Laura. She screamed and grabbed a sheet. I saw everything, Laura. No need to hide. Maybe your trainer should pay more attention to your pecs, I said, laughing. Hendricks stood without clothes in the middle of the room, looking confused. His upper body was impressive, but the rest wasn't, and I laughed harder. Don't bother, Laura. I'll be in town long enough to file for divorce. Good luck in Wisconsin. Jacob, please, she began, but I walked out. I left the door open as I walked out, and Hendricks didn't move the entire time. Laura tried calling me, leaving messages from both her phone and the motels. In her messages, she said I had abandoned her and that she needed Hendricks, first for training, then for emotional support. I stayed in town for 2 days to start the divorce process. While going through the clothes I took from their room, I found Hendricks's wallet, keys, phone, and a small black notebook with names, addresses, phone numbers, and ratings of sexual partners. Laura was rated 6 out of 10. Em later told me that someone had brought them clothes after I left, and they checked out the next morning wearing ill-fitting tracksuits. The man had brought a spare key to Hendricks' car. Before heading back to Leadville, I stopped by Hendricks' house and gave his wife his clothes, personal items, and copies of the photos Zeke and I had taken. Zeke's of them entering the motel holding hands, mine of them undressing. None were explicit, but it was clear what was happening. She was particularly interested in the black book. I also handed her Laura's things and suggested she call Laura to pick them up, laughing as I left. A couple of hours later, as I drove back to Leadville, Laura called. Jacob, you left me. Let's talk and bring my bikes when you come. She clearly missed her bikes, but I had already sold them. Screw you, I replied, and hung up. Later, my boss was hosting a Christmas party for everyone at the plant. I volunteered to bartend since I knew the difference between gin and bourbon. The party was in full swing, and I only took one break to use the restroom. I was enjoying myself like the other guests. One woman brought me a plate of food and told me to take a break. She sat at the bar with me while the rest of the guests, about 40 people, mingled around the large basement. Some sat by the fireplace laughing while others danced. We were the only ones not joining in, me eating and her watching. My name's Diane Webster, she said. I've been watching you, and you don't seem bothered about missing the main part of the party. I dried my hands and shook her hand. Jacob Wagner, and I'm probably having more fun here. You'd be surprised what people tell their bartender. She laughed. I hear you work at the plant. Yeah, and you? I'm an accountant and a neighbor, so I get invited to these parties. Do they have parties often? 3 or 4 times a year. They're usually fun and sometimes wild. Is this one like that? No, Christmas is tamer. The 4th of July parties are big, though. I haven't worked with Jonathan long, but he seems like a great guy. Oh, he and Amber are wonderful. I hadn't finished my food when a guest asked for drinks, and Diane helped serve him. Thanks, I said. You've done this before? She laughed. I've opened a few bottles. Jonathan and Amber Whitmore, our hosts, were great people. Jonathan had deep knowledge of the plant, the mine, the quarry, and transportation. I was lucky he took me under his wing, and I enjoyed working as his assistant. After I finished eating, another guest offered to take over bartending. Take a break and dance with this lovely lady, he said, pointing to Diane. I handed him my towel, bowed to Diane, and she curtsied back. We laughed and danced, staying close for 3 songs. Afterward, I told her, I should mention, I'm married, and she stepped back. Is she here? No, it's complicated, but I can explain quickly. Go ahead. We grabbed our drinks and went upstairs to the office. She sat on the sofa and invited me to join her. Okay, tell me about your marriage. I told her the whole story. When I got to the part about stealing their clothes, she burst out laughing. Once she calmed down, she asked, So, when's the divorce? I filed after Thanksgiving, so it'll take a few months. What's your story? I asked. Same as yours, except my husband didn't need a coach for his athletic accomplishments. He practiced regularly with waitresses at local bars. I never caught him, but in a small town, word gets around. That was a little over a year ago. How do you feel about life after the divorce? I asked. It's still new. We divorced 5 months ago, but the problem is that many people think being divorced means I'm available. I laughed, but I realized she wasn't someone I wanted to get involved with. We talked until Amber Whitmore told us it was time to leave. I walked Diane to her house next door, and we said goodbye with a handshake. 2 days later, I asked my boss for Diane's phone number. I can't give it without her permission, but I can give her your number and she can decide. That was fine with me. 3 days later, she called. We talked for a long time and she gave me her number. We spoke often, and our first date was 2 days before Christmas. We had dinner, danced a little, and I walked her home. She was spending Christmas with her family, and I was alone in my apartment. Around 5:30 p.m. on Christmas Day, my doorbell rang. It was Diane. "Would you like some company?" she asked. "I really would," I replied, and she came in with a small basket. She laid out turkey, ham, potatoes, and all the usual Christmas dishes. "I told my parents you were probably alone and hungry, so my mom put this together for you. Thank her for me. It looks fantastic." We ate and talked the entire time, then cleaned up together. Later, we sat on my couch with eggnog, still talking. I found out her ex-husband worked at the best hardware store in town, and I realized I knew him from casual chats at the store. They had been married for 3 years before divorcing. "He seemed like a nice guy," I said. "He is. We're still friends, but he cheats, and I can't tolerate cheaters. Can I ask something personal? Feel free to say it's none of my business." "Go ahead." "Your ex works at a hardware store, and you're an accountant. How do you afford to live near the Whitmores?" She smiled. "Thanks to my grandparents. They owned the land where the area was built. My house was the first one, and was used as the model for the others. When everything was sold, they gave it to me." "Great-grandparents, where do they live?" "They have a small ranch in Texas. They're actually at my parents' house for Christmas, and I just got back." It was past midnight when Diane decided to leave. I walked her to her car and saw about 10 inches of snow had fallen. I wasn't used to such heavy snow and worried about her driving home, but she reassured me, having driven in these conditions all her life. "It's no big deal," she said while we cleared the snow off her car. "The plows don't come out until about 6 inches fall. I'll be fine." She put her hand on my shoulder, pulled me in for a kiss, and said, "Merry Christmas. I'll call you when I get home if you want." "I want you to," I said, kissing her back. It was our second date and our first kiss. Our third date was on New Year's Eve at her parents' party. She introduced me to her family, including her brother, sister, and their spouses. The party was busy, and we didn't get much time together, so I grabbed a drink and socialized. Her grandparents had already returned to Texas, but about 50 people were there, including my boss and his wife. "Well, Jacob," Jonathan Whitmore said, "you must be doing something right to be invited here." "I think so too, Jonathan," I replied, and his wife added, "Call me Amber anytime." I didn't see much of Diane as she was helping her parents, and when I tried to assist, I was told to enjoy the party. I did, thanks to the Whitmores. They introduced me to several important community members. A young lady named Rosita Cameron, or Rosie as she preferred, stuck by me, ensuring I had food and drinks. After an hour, I was ready to escape her clingy attention. I tried to stay near the Whitmores and other guests, but Rosie wouldn't leave me alone. I managed to hide for a bit in the restroom, but she was waiting for me when I came out. Eventually, I told her I was leaving. I looked for Diane, but couldn't find her, so I thanked her mother and said goodbye. Then I grabbed my coat and left. The next morning, as I made breakfast, my phone rang. It was Diane. "Happy New Year," I said. "How was the party?" "It was fine until Mom said you left. I got upset, and the party went downhill." "Why did you leave without telling me?" "The main reason I left is a young lady named Reseda. She clung to me and wouldn't let go. Every time I saw you, you were busy hosting, pouring drinks, or serving snacks. I looked for you before leaving, but Reseda was still holding onto my hand, so I left to escape her." I sensed her mood lift a bit. "Oh my God, she's a good friend of mine, and I asked her to make sure no other woman got too close to you." "Well, she did her job well. Nobody came near me, but I didn't want her to scare you off. Anyway, Happy New Year." "Happy New Year to you too. It would have been better if you'd stayed." "I'm making breakfast if you'd like to join." "I'd love to, but I'm watching the Rose Parade with my family." We chatted a bit and set up dinner for 3 days later. The day before, I called to confirm she could still come. "Sorry, Jacob, something came up," she said without offering to reschedule. That evening, I remembered I needed epoxy to fix a broken lamp, so I stopped by the hardware store. There, I overheard Diane's ex-husband, David Webster, talking to a customer. "Yeah, she's coming back to me. Just a couple more dates, and we'll be together again. I screwed up the first time, but I've learned. After dinner tomorrow, I'll know where we stand." The customer wished him luck, and then David noticed me. "Hey, Jacob, need help?" "Just some epoxy, the small kind," he laughed. "We barely sell the big cans." At checkout, I couldn't resist asking, "I heard you talking about dinner. Trying to get back with your ex?" "Not just any ex, my ex-wife. I messed up, and I'm trying to fix it. Tomorrow's my birthday, and she agreed to have dinner with me. She used to give me special birthday gifts, if you know what I mean." He laughed, clearly implying something more. "What does she think about getting back together?" I asked. "Not sure, but we're friendly." Sometimes we have dinner or spend the night together, if you know what I mean. I got the hint and took my epoxy and change, then left. 2 days after their dinner, Diane called me. "How are you?" she asked. "Not bad. And you?" "Good overall." "So, your dinner with David went well?" "Yes." "How did you know about that?" "Does it matter? He thinks you're getting back together. He mentioned that just a couple more pleasant evenings with you and it'll all work out. Is that true? A couple more nice nights and everything will be fine?" "What do you mean by pleasant evenings?" she asked, her tone serious. "Dinner, dancing, maybe a roll in bed for his birthday gift. He said you always gave him nice birthday gifts, and he hinted that closeness with you was pretty good." "Jacob, that's not true." "Oh? How is it not true? Just talking?" "Yes, just talking. Pillow talk is always nice." There was a long pause, then she said, "Goodbye, Jacob." I looked at the phone and quietly said, "Goodbye, Diane." The next 2 weeks at work were a lifesaver. Our equipment was down, we were behind in production, and we were short on workers. Overall, it was a tough 2 weeks, but it kept me busy, like a cat burying its poop, and time passed quickly. On the last workday of the month, Jonathan and I, as usual, had lunch together. We ordered, sat down, and drank our coffee. "What's going on between you and Diana?" he asked. "Amber's been in touch with her, and we thought things were going well. Then Amber told me you accused her of sleeping with David. You don't have to share your personal life, but..." I took a sip of coffee. "Well, here's the story." I explained everything to him. "So you didn't directly accuse her, but you implied it, right? Just like Webster hinted to you. The issue is, she didn't deny it." "Yeah," I said. "He broke her heart once, and he'll do it again." "She's a grown woman. She'll handle it," Jonathan replied. "I hope so," I said. The rest of lunch was focused on work. Jonathan wanted me to go to Atlanta in a few weeks to convince headquarters to give us 2 more trucks for the quarry. It would be my first trip to HQ, and I was looking forward to getting off that icy mountain for a while. As I drove to the Denver airport for my flight to Atlanta, it had been a month since I'd spoken with Diana, and I had also switched hardware stores. This was only my 4th flight, and I'd heard flying in or out of Denver during the day could be rough. The takeoff proved it, with 10 minutes of turbulence, but things calmed down once we leveled out. In Atlanta, we got the 2 extra trucks, not because of my pleas, but because the numbers made it clear. I think HQ just wanted to make me sweat a bit. Jonathan suggested I visit my parents on the way back, so I did. I missed the warm southern weather, especially in February. It was freezing in Leadville, but in my hometown it was 20 degrees Celsius and sunny. My parents picked me up from the airport, and after hugs and kisses, we caught up on the latest news. We avoided talking about Laura, and my lawyer had only called me once about the divorce. Laura only wanted her 2 bicycles, which I had already sold. I decided to call my lawyer the next day to check in. After dinner, I called my friend Zeke, and we met at one of our favorite spots for drinks. He told me Laura and Hendrix had moved into the old trailer together. Their only income was from his work as a trainer, and she was still doing nothing but training. At least she was getting it for free. They had posted flyers all over town, asking for sponsors to help her get to Wisconsin in April for her Ironman competition. They even went on local TV twice, begging for money. Zeke, Em, and some of my other friends made it clear that Laura was still married to me, had cheated on her husband, and was now living with her coach, Hendrix. Hendrix's wife even went on TV to expose how she retrieved their belongings from the motel, although she didn't mention who helped her. The motel's unintentional publicity boosted business, but Laura's only sponsor remained the gym where she trained. Her donations were minimal, or so I was told, though only Laura and Hendrix knew the real numbers. There was also a rumor she had gotten pregnant, but had a pregnancy termination to avoid disrupting her training. However, it was just a rumor as far as anyone knew. The next day, I called my lawyer, who confirmed most of what I had heard. He mentioned our trial was likely to take place in April and asked if I would attend. "Probably not," I replied. "No worries. I can handle it," he said. The following morning, I flew back to Denver. Some seasoned travelers say morning flights are smoother, and they were right. No turbulence. After landing, I picked up my truck and drove home. The weather was clear and sunny, but when I got to Leadville, it was freezing cold like a witch's chest. It was too late to go to the office, so I headed straight to the best restaurant in town. I planned to have dinner, but as I looked for a seat, I spotted Diana with a man, his back to me. I assumed it was David. We made brief eye contact, and I turned around and left. Back at my apartment, I microwaved a meatloaf dinner and had a beer. As I went to bed, the mountain wind was howling. Wind speeds of 110 miles per hour weren't unusual, scattering snow everywhere. My last thought before sleep was how nice it would be to have someone to cuddle with. The next morning, my apartment was warm, but the frosted windows made it clear how cold it was outside. I hoped to avoid going to the quarry that day. Later, I stopped by Jonathan's office to tell him about my trip, and he congratulated me on securing the 2 trucks. "To be honest, I didn't think we'd get them," he said. "You must have made an impression. Great job." "Thanks," I replied, then headed back to my office to catch up on work. That evening, I returned to the cafe. Diana or not, I wanted a good meal, and their coffee was the best. I ordered and wrapped my hands around my cup to stay warm. "Can I sit down?" I heard a familiar voice ask. Without looking up, I replied, "Are there no other seats?" "There isn't one I'd like," she said. "Fine," I said. "If this place is so special, it's all yours." I grabbed my coffee and coat and moved across the restaurant. When I looked back, I saw Diana leaving. Apparently, it wasn't that special to her after all. After that, the coffee and food didn't taste as good. A few days later, Jonathan called me into his office. "Have a seat, Jacob," he said. I sat down and he started, "I'm in a bit of a tough spot. Next week, the company president, 2 senior vice presidents, and their wives are visiting. They'll stop here before heading to Vail to ski, and I want to throw a party for them. As my assistant, you should be invited. And since Diana is a good friend of my wife, she'll be invited too." Jonathan paused before continuing. "It would be better if both you and Diana came with dates. It would also be nice if Diana brought someone." I knew where this was heading. "Are you following?" he asked. "Yes, sir, I understand. Let me try to help. Invite Diana and she might bring her ex. I've heard they're getting back together if they haven't already. I can head to the quarry and start repairing one of the Cat 789S, which will definitely need work by then. That should solve your problem, right?" Jonathan smiled, shaking his head. "You've impressed me since you started here with how quickly you come up with good, practical solutions. But this is the first time you've made me think you're dumber than a truck full of rocks. The party is at my house next Friday. Wear a suit and tie and bring a date. Now get back to work." Wear a suit and tie and bring a date. He meant it. The suit and tie were easy, but finding a date was the challenge. There were only 10 days until the party, and I hardly knew any women in town. None of them were close enough to ask to a Whitmore party, and I didn't even know who was single or available. Jonathan wasn't the only one in a bind. I was too. Time flew by, and I still didn't have a date. It was Saturday afternoon, and I was in my apartment. I opened the fridge to take out the bag of chili I had defrosted earlier. I love chili and experimenting with different recipes. This last batch had turned out great. I grabbed the chili and a beer, but noticed the fridge light was off and the motor wasn't running. I opened and closed the door a few times. Nothing. I checked the electrical panel, and the fridge breaker was tripped. I reset it, but it tripped again. After a few attempts, I put the beer and chili back in the fridge, threw on my coat, and headed to the hardware store. There were 2 hardware stores in town, and I had avoided the one where David Webster worked. But the other store was closed, which was unusual for a Saturday afternoon. With no choice, I went to Webster's store. I quickly found what I needed and headed to the checkout, hoping to avoid running into Webster. Unfortunately, there he was, talking to a man I recognized as Diana's father. I had met him at a party but didn't interact much. I mainly recognized him by his distinctive curled mustache, which he was proud of. He sang in a barbershop quartet, and all 4 members had similar mustaches. I listened to their conversation. I thought everything was settled, but she stopped talking to me, Webster said. "She did the right thing," Diana's father replied. "You don't deserve a second chance. You messed up once, and none of us, especially Diana, think you'd act any differently if she gave you another chance. But who's this guy she's dating? No one seems to know him, and no one has seen them together. Is he from Leadville?" "It's none of your business, David. Just leave her alone." They finished the transaction, and after Diana's father said, "Just leave her alone," he took his change and left without looking back. Webster saw me and smiled. "Long time no see. How are you?" "Not bad," I replied. "It seems like every time I come here, you're talking about your personal life." "Do you ever discuss anything else?" He laughed. "It's a small town. There's not much else to talk about. How's your personal life? Last time we talked, you were trying to win back your ex-wife." "Not great. She's met some guy who's completely charmed her, but no one knows who he is or has seen them together." I remembered seeing Diana with a man at the cafe. "Maybe he's not from town," I suggested. "He has to be," Webster said, shaking his head. I completed my purchase, went home, replaced the circuit breaker, and felt relieved when the fridge started humming again. I heated up the chili, had 2 beers, and stared out at the snow falling, wondering who Diana's new boyfriend might be. We didn't have a long relationship, just a few dates, but I liked her. The next day, Sunday, I was doing laundry. My building only had 4 apartments and no laundry room, so every Sunday I took my clothes to the laundromat on Main Street. It was always empty when I went, and I often wondered how it stayed in business. One perk of going early was finding parking easily, as the street stayed quiet until after church, when people flocked to the restaurant next door. It was still early, and mine was the only truck parked outside. I was reading the news on my phone when the door to the laundromat opened. I looked up and saw Diana. I went back to my phone, but I could hear her footsteps approaching. She sat down on the plastic chair next to me. We stared at each other for a few moments before she spoke. "I think we can help each other," she said. "How?" I asked. "Jonathan and Amber are having a party on Friday. We were both invited, and I know they'd like us to bring dates. Why don't we set aside our differences for a few days and go together?" I thought for a moment. "What about David? Aren't you two getting back together? Won't he be jealous?" Honestly, he's not the kind of person you'd take to a party like that, if you know what I mean. I listened, and for a moment I felt sorry for David. "What do you mean? David was your husband for 3 years, right? You must have gone everywhere with him. He lived in the house you're in now, and he attended the Whitmore parties with you. If he's not good enough to bring to a party, that's sad. I get that he cheated on you, but he's trying to win you back. Maybe this party is his chance to prove he's changed." She stared at me, her expression unchanged. "Are you saying I should go with David?" she asked. "I'm not sure, but it doesn't seem like you're planning to go with me." Without a word, she stood up and walked out. As I watched her leave, I realized how foolish I'd been. She had reached out to me, and I stubbornly kept pushing her away. That was pretty stupid. I jumped up and followed her. Diana, wait." She was already holding the door handle, about to leave, but she stopped. I caught up to her. "Well?" she asked. I stammered. "Come on, Jacob, speak up. But it better be something worth hearing." "I don't know the status of your relationship with David, so if I'm out of line, tell me. But here's what I've been thinking." I took a deep breath. "Laura cheated on me. David cheated on you. I'm not interested in getting back with Laura. She's happy with her coach. But David seems eager to get back with you. And after a few dates with you, I can see why. I like you more and more. Then, when we agreed to go on a date, you canceled, saying something came up. I let it go, but I later found out you were seeing your ex-husband. You told me you two were still good friends. I spoke to him, and he mentioned trying to reconcile with you. He even hinted, though never outright said, that you spent some very pleasant evenings together, especially on his birthday. Then yesterday, I overheard your father telling David to stay away because you have a new boyfriend. David didn't seem willing to give up. So now, I'm stuck in the middle, between your ex-husband, this new boyfriend, and the guy I saw you with at the restaurant. You suggested we go to the party together, and I thought maybe we could build something serious. But I don't want to compete, especially when I don't know the rules. With you, it feels like there are no rules, so I don't know what to do." By the time I finished, we were back sitting on the plastic chairs. She took my hands in hers. "Did you really mean it when you said you like me more and more?" she asked. "Yes. And if there was no ex-husband and no guy from out of town, would you go to the party with me?" "With pleasure." "What time will you pick me up, or should I meet you there?" "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "I mean, I have no intention of getting back together with David. The 3 meetings we had after the divorce were strictly about the divorce. He tried to convince me to give up alimony, but I won't. I don't need his money, but he'll keep paying until I remarry, if that ever happens. I canceled our date to make it clear to him that it was over. Nothing sexual has happened between us since the divorce, no matter what he might have implied. Honestly, I didn't even realize our last meeting was on his birthday. As for the out-of-town boyfriend, that's you, or was you, depending on how you want to look at it. Any questions?" she added with a smile. "Only about 3 dozen, I replied. "You can start asking them over dinner tonight. For now, your laundry's dry and ready to fold. Is 6:30 at my house okay?" "That'll be perfect," I said, still feeling a bit dazed. "Great. See you then," she said, standing up. She kissed me, took a couple of steps, then came back and kissed me again. This time it lasted longer. "I really like kissing you," she said as she walked away. I watched her leave, amazed at how quickly things had changed. I also felt surprised by my own foolishness. Why hadn't I talked to her a month ago? Sometimes men can be such fools. That night, dinner wasn't memorable for the food, but everything else was unforgettable and nearly perfect. It would have been ideal if the night ended in wild act, but it didn't. However, it ended with very pleasant kisses. On Thursday, Jonathan asked me if I had a date for the party. I assured him I did. "That's good because I hear Diana has a date too. But I expect you both to behave, okay? I think everything will be fine, I said with a smile. Friday night, I parked in her driveway, then walked over to Jonathan and Amber's house. There were 2 limousines and several other cars outside. I rang Diana's doorbell and smiled when she opened it. She invited me in while she grabbed her shawl. She was wearing that little black dress every woman owns, the one that makes them look incredible. "Wow," was all I could say when I saw her. She smiled. When Jonathan opened the door for us, his eyes widened. "Are you 2 together?" At that moment, Diana leaned over and kissed me. Jonathan looked at both of us and said, "I'll take that as a yes," with a smile. I was pleased when Jonathan introduced me as his assistant to the 3 bosses and their wives. The president even mentioned that I had convinced them to approve 2 new trucks. "Yes, sir," I replied, but did you see the numbers?" After laughing and confirming that he had, we enjoyed a long, pleasant evening. The guests of honor left by midnight, and Diana and I were the last ones there at 2 a.m. Eventually, Amber admitted to Jonathan that she knew Diana and I would show up together, but just wanted to see how nervous he'd get. We all had a good laugh. I walked Diana home, and since it was late, we kissed at her door, but she didn't invite me in. My lawyer called the next day to tell me that my divorce hearing with Laura was set for April 7th. He asked if I planned to attend. Last time, I said probably not. This time, I said yes. My relationship with Diana kept progressing, though we hadn't rushed into anything physical. We were both content getting to know each other better. Then the day of the divorce trial arrived. I sat next to my lawyer in the courtroom. Laura didn't show up, but her lawyer was there. "Where is she?" the judge asked. "In Wisconsin, Your Honor," her lawyer replied. "Why isn't she here?" "She's competing in an Ironman competition." "What's that?" the judge asked. Her lawyer explained the extreme endurance required for the competition. "And she considers this more important than today's hearing?" The judge shook his head. "I can't answer that, Your Honor," the lawyer said. "I think I can," the judge replied. Before I knew it, I was officially divorced. Laura received nothing but the money I had left her. My lawyer shook my hand and told me that in a few weeks I'd be officially single. I spent some time with my family, and during that time, we heard on the local news that Laura had been disqualified from the Ironman in Wisconsin. She had completed the swim portion, but got into an argument with a judge over an equipment issue. Apparently, during the swim-to-bike transition, Laura, who placed 297th out of 1,300, dropped her towel. Her coach, Jason Hendricks, handed it to her, and she was disqualified for receiving outside assistance, which violated the rules. This enraged Laura, and she physically attacked Hendricks, blaming him for the disqualification. She was arrested and held in Wisconsin, awaiting trial. Jason Hendricks was banned for life from all Ironman competitions, and his coaching license was revoked. To make matters worse, Laura's bike was found to have damaged gears, something else she blamed on Hendricks. When I heard the news, I laughed until I nearly cried. 2 years of training, a divorce, an affair, and rumors of a pregnancy termination had led to her being disqualified in the first stage of her big competition. All her preparation, and it ended in chaos. Her beloved bikes, now useless to her. Snowstorms pounded the roads as I drove back to Leadville from the Denver airport. Diana and I had stayed in touch while I was away, so she knew about the divorce and Laura's disqualification. When I finally pulled up to my house and grabbed my bag, Diana suddenly jumped on me. After a flurry of kisses, she practically dragged me to my front door, helping me open it. We both stumbled into the living room, and she started undressing me. At first, I thought she was just helping me out of my winter clothes, but she kept going. Hey, hold on a second. Let me catch my breath," I said, laughing. "No chance, mister," she teased. "You're divorced now, and I'm going to have you until I lose my breath." I stopped her, pulling her into a tight hug so she couldn't move. "I'm looking forward to this part. But what does having me until you lose your breath even mean?" She laughed. "I don't know, it just came out. I guess it means I can screw your brains out now that you're single." "Well, that makes it clear," I said, helping her finish undressing me. Then we started undressing her. We didn't stay in our clothes for long. Soon we were both without clothes in my bed. That first moment wasn't about affection or romance. It was pure desperation, the kind that comes from 2 people who hadn't had closeness in a long time and were eager to break their celibacy. The next day, we both barely made it to work. Diana stayed the night, and when we left for work, we were still getting dressed. We spent most of the day talking on the phone, figuring out how we could meet again later. She had a meeting she couldn't miss, or we would have had a mid-afternoon date at my apartment. Though we couldn't manage it during the day, we definitely made up for it in the evening. I gave her a key to my apartment, and when I arrived home, she was already there, fresh out of the shower. I've never showered faster in my life. I jumped into bed with her, and our lovemaking that night was different. We took our time, explored each other, and enjoyed every moment. I studied every inch of her body, learning how to make her smile and moan simultaneously. I also discovered how to make her scream and laugh at the same time. It felt like learning the art of love from scratch. In the 5th century BC, Chinese strategist Sun Tzu wrote The Art of War on Warfare Strategies. After a week with Diana, my understanding of love had transformed. I mentally began drafting a book called The Art of Love, entirely dedicated to her. The physical connection was incredible, but it was more than just act. I loved looking at her, touching her, tasting her, and being close to her. I could always sense when she was near. My parents used to tell me that our dog, Baron, could sense when I was coming home. He'd sit by the window, wagging his tail, then run from door to door trying to guess which one I'd enter. I felt the same way about Diana. When she was nearby, my heart would race and a smile would spread across my face. Closeness can be described, but the sensations can't be put into words. A year after our first night together, we got married. It was a beautiful, clear, warm mountain day, unlike the stormy weather from the previous year. Mountain weather took some getting used to, but that day everything was perfect. My family came to the wedding, and just before the ceremony, my father pulled me aside. "Are you curious about what happened to Laura?" he asked. "Not really, but I'm sure you'll tell me anyway," I replied. "Well, you know about Wisconsin, right? That she attacked him?" "Yeah, I heard. She was jailed for 6 months because of it. When she got out, she came back to town, but no one wanted anything to do with her, not even Hendricks. He's still at the gym, but just as a regular trainer now, not an Ironman coach. Laura went back to her old job since she's great with computers. She's given up on training except for the annual hot dog eating contest on the 4th of July. She's probably gained 25 pounds, he added with a laugh. The world had finally fallen into place. I was about to marry the love of my life, and all the chaos from before had settled down. Diana and I would occasionally see her ex-husband, David Webster, around town, but we never spoke to him. Nearly a year into our marriage, I had to stop by a hardware store. By then, a big chain store had opened, offering cheaper prices than the local shops, which had been forced to close. I needed new belts for my sander, so I went to the chain store. While choosing the belts, someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around and saw David Webster. "Hello, stranger," he said. "Hi," I replied. "How are you?" "Not bad," he answered, wearing a vest with the store's logo. "Do you work here now?" I asked. "Yeah, this is the only job in town. The pay's good and the benefits are great." "Well, I've got what I need, so I'll be going," I said, ready to leave. He touched my hand to stop me. "I want you to know you did me a favor," he said. "Is that so?" "Yeah, I don't have to pay alimony anymore." He laughed, finding it amusing. I just smiled politely and walked away, thinking to myself, yeah, but now I get the birthday presents. As life moved forward, Diana and I settled into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Our days together were filled with simple joys, weekend trips to the mountains, quiet dinners at home, and moments of shared laughter over things only the two of us could understand. The chaos of the past seemed like a distant memory, one that had lost its sharp edges and faded into something I could finally let go of. Every now and then I'd catch a glimpse of Laura around town. She'd pass by on the street, or I'd spot her in line at the grocery store, her once fierce determination now softened into something unrecognizable. Hendricks was a shadow of his former self, too. They had become part of the town's folklore, a cautionary tale of ambition gone too far, of priorities twisted beyond repair. People whispered about them sometimes, but no one really cared anymore. Their drama had burned out long ago. As for Diana and me, we had built something that couldn't be touched by the past. Our love wasn't about grand gestures or fireworks. It was about trust, about showing up for each other every day, in the small, quiet moments that made up a life. The kind of love that grows deeper with time, without needing to prove itself to anyone but us. I often thought about how lucky I was, how close I'd come to letting all of it slip away. There were moments, fleeting but real, when I almost let pride, fear, or doubt get in the way of what was right in front of me. But in the end, Diana and I chose each other, over and over again, in the ways that mattered most. Our life wasn't perfect. No life ever is. We had our share of arguments and misunderstandings, but we always found our way back. Because that's what love is, isn't it? It's not about the absence of problems. It's about facing them together, standing side by side, even when things get hard, especially when things get hard. Now, as I sit here writing this, looking back on everything that's happened, I realize something important. It's not about how you start or even how you end. It's about the middle, the messy, complicated, beautiful middle where all the real living happens. And in that middle, I found everything I'd ever been looking for. Diana and I have been through enough to know that we can face whatever comes next. We don't have all the answers, but we've got each other. And in the end, that's more than enough. As for Laura, Hendrix, David, and all the others who crossed our paths, their stories are their own now, just as mine is mine. But as far as I'm concerned, this chapter of my life, this part where I've finally found peace, love, and the simple joy of waking up next to someone who makes every day better, is the only story that matters. And I can't wait to see what comes next. What